All right, man. Appreciate you. We're going to start with the first question about Gandy Golden. So just looking through the AMA server, first question says, your model has Gandy Golden listed as the only wide receiver success outside the first 2 rounds, and what makes him so special? And so for me, one thing is just, his size. Obviously, you can't teach size. With him being 6'4", he's a massive presence. And when you look at his production at Liberty, I know Liberty's not a big name school or anything like that, so it's easier to command a bigger share of the targets there. But just his production, 37% of all yards that their team accrued for was by Gandy Golden, and 40% of the touchdowns. He's just a big body that knows how to make plays, and so that's just something that is so interesting about Gandy Golden because you look at that depth chart in Washington and you see Terry McLaurin, who is definitely the wide receiver one there. I don't think there's any question about that after his debut. But you look at the other ones, you got Kelvin Harmon, Trey Quinn. They're yet to break out, so Gandy Golden can definitely make his presence known there. With the tight end situation being Jeremy Sprinkle, Richard Rodgers, and Thad Moss, that's not really a target share that you're worried about. So I think for someone to come in and make an early impact, because that's what that success model is all about, is a rookie wide receiver making an early impact. I think Gandy Golden has a great chance to make that happen sooner rather than later. And if you look at the vacated targets just in Washington alone, compared to they have 130 total targets that were surrendered from last year. And of those, 120 of them are short targets, which is 0 to 15 yards down the field. And so if you're looking for somebody to plug in for 120 targets to take in, a large part of that, you want a secure guy like Gandy Golden. He has good hands. He's great catch radius. And with a rookie quarterback like Haskins, I can see that being somebody that it just becomes a safety blanket with him in Washington earlier rather than later, and has that red zone upside as well. So that's kind of what I see about Gandy Golden that makes him so special. And I think that opportunity, especially short with his size, is what bumped him up in that model to be one of those few successes without the pristine draft capital. So that's kind of my reasoning for Antonio Gandy Golden. All right, so the next question is in here, and it's talking about rookie defensive players with their landing spots. Aside from the big names, there's the Isaiah Simmons out there, the Chase Youngs, and those guys are obviously going to get, the attention that they deserve. But some of those other guys down the list that landing spots are intriguing to me. I definitely think Zack Vaughn. He's probably going to be an outside linebacker, which is tough in an IDP league if you don't have that edge designation. The upside's kind of limited there unless you're in that edge specific, but I think he's just a talented player with Demario Davis. I don't know if he would ever slide over to an inside linebacker role, but Demario Davis is on the older side. He's on the tail end of his career. So I think Zack Vaughn in a defense like the Saints, which is great for linebackers, he's somebody that I'm definitely looking to scoop up later on and kind of let other people take, the Patrick Queens, the Isaiah Simmons. And then if I'm set at linebacker and maybe just looking for depth with upside, Zack Vaughn's somebody I'm looking at for sure. But aside from him, Troy Dye, he was a tackle monster when he was at Oregon in college. I used to watch his film all the time, and he was just somebody that stood out kind of among the rest just as a physical linebacker with great speed and range. So I think he could burst out on the Vikings at some point. I don't know if it would be right now just with their current depth chart, but some guys, Zack Vaughn, Troy Dye for sure. And then kind of on the defensive backside, I never really liked spending a whole lot of draft capital on a cornerback or a safety in IDP league just because they're so replaceable. But when I have been taking one, it's usually been somebody like Ashton Davis, which probably we're going to spike up now, with the Jamal Adams news. But before that, if you were in a draft a couple weeks ago, he's somebody whose stock's definitely gone up from that. But Kyle Duggar as well, which is the McCourty twins, being about 32, 33 years old. So those guys are further down the list. I'd say, DLF, we have them in the outside the top 15, inside the top 30 in terms of all IDP prospects. So those are kind of the few of those guys I'm looking at as well. Not really much on the defensive tackle. Aside from Derek Brown, but that whole Panthers defense is getting completely scrapped over from the start. So, I mean, I'd rather get somebody like either Gross Matos. I'd rather roll the dice on a defensive end versus a defensive tackle. But if you're in a defensive tackle specific league, then Derek Brown, I think, would be a great pick for sure. Let's see. Next question is from Sam. He's talking about how CeeDee Lamb, he's a bit surprised he's at the top just because of the competition for targets. And he's asking about just whether or not those tight end targets from Witten, are they more so going to go to Jarwin or are they going to go somewhere else around the field? And he's asking about whether that I weighted that in my weighted opportunity for wide receivers. And so I think the interesting thing with CeeDee Lamb is that if he gets put in the slot, I think he could have just an amazing year. I mean, his separation is uncanny. And with Randall Cobb and Jason Witten being gone from the middle of the field, those are two guys that, Randall Cobb in the slot and Jason Witten over the middle. I think whether it's Amari Cooper getting moved into the inside or CeeDee Lamb, I think whichever one of those does get the slot role is going to have, a massive year for fantasy. I think that's one of the, if we can get some coach insight on that with CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, how they're thinking. I mean, we've seen some about keeping Amari Cooper on the outside and CeeDee Lamb on the inside, but I'm sure it'll be kind of they'll share that role. But I think whoever's going to get in that middle side, I think they're going to get a lot more of the targets than Jarwin would. Jarwin's underrated for being just like a flyer tight end for sure, just because Dak Prescott's been thrown to the tight end, and just as someone reliable for him. But I think I wouldn't worry about that as much in the middle of the field with Dak Prescott out there for one more year at least, but his contract only being 1 year. I think he's just going to be trying to ball out with Zeke and Amari and Gallup, who's emerged into a very solid wide receiver too in his own right. But getting CeeDee Lamb that late in the first round was also just kind of unfair, I thought. getting him to go out there with them, I don't know how you're going to cover the three of them. So I think Lamb, I'm not that worried about, the target competition. I think they're all going to get their own. It might not be every single week, but it's going to be somebody who's going to be valuable for sure, which is why he was the number one highest score in my success model, just with the way Dallas runs their offense. And so they're talking about, let's see, next question is a dynasty, some Devy prospects in 2021, aside from the big names. So yeah, I kind of try to keep the Devy radar for myself. I try to keep that I don't follow it as intensely just because I like to focus on the dynasty landscape now and try not to let things that I see sway my rookie analysis when they get to their rookie year, just because you can see some guys that, Trent Richardson was a monster, and he, if you were basing off that and then you don't do any analysis on his landing spot at the Colts and all that, it kind of gets messy. But I think some of the most intriguing prospects that I am watching closely, I think Devontae Smith, Alabama, he might have been the second best wide receiver at Alabama last year already, even more so than Ruggs. So he's somebody. Jalen Waddle, those guys aren't really no names, but one running back that I am looking at, I think Max Borghi is very interesting at Washington State. He gets a lot of pass work because Mike Leach just believes in passing the ball, pass to win. And Borghi is the perfect running back for that offense. He might be the best, pass catching running back out there next year. And so if he gets in a great landing spot somewhere with, where they have just a desperate need to get the running back the ball out of their hands quickly, I think Max Borghi could be somebody very interesting. So that's one guy that I'd be looking at for sure. And then there's another question about Ino Benjamin being a possible success in the running back model. Yeah, so he was very close to being a success. I think he was listed as a success at the end. Let me pull that up. But he, which is very interesting with his draft capital, just to have somebody like Ino Benjamin, a 7th round pick. I was surprised he fell to the 7th round, honestly, but I trust NFL coaches way more so than myself. But just thinking about his landing spot, there's Kenyan Drake and Chase Edmonds. And Chase Edmonds was good in a limited sample, but that's a lot of question marks, I would say, for an offense looking to be as potent and with a head coach as great as Kingsbury. I think in Kyler Murray out there, I think that's a spot that obviously something would have to go wrong for Kenyan Drake or Chase Edmonds, but he seems like of the late round picks this year in Dynasty, he looks like the one that could most easily take over. I mean, he was a monster at Arizona State for, years. And if you look at Kenyan Drake's game log when he got to the Cardinals, I know he finished fantasy wise great with his 140 yard rushing in week 12 and 166 in week 13. But the 5 games before that, he never got past. Let's see, he had one game over 37 yards, and his last game in the season, he had 60 yards. So it's kind of been hit or miss with him right now. I mean, there's no way to tell if people are going to figure out Kenyan Drake on the Cardinals or if he's going to take off. He could very well take off, but I think if you take Kenyan Drake in that first round, early second round, you almost have to take Chase Edmonds or Ino Benjamin over both of them. And I mean, with as well as with Kenyan Drake just as a handcuff, because I mean, Kingsbury recruited Ino Benjamin in high school. Ino went elsewhere. So this is somebody that Kingsbury's had his eye on for a long time and somebody that he's always liked. So I think should the opportunity arise, he has the talent. We saw it in college. He is kind of a smaller back, so that is interesting just with the question marks around him, but he was also a 7th round pick. You can scoop him up late. And I'd rather get somebody like him than LaMichael Pirine at the Jets, because even if you take over for Le'Veon Bell with an injury, you're still in an Adam Gase New York Jets offense, or AJ Dillon, which we'll get to a little bit later. Just I like Ino Benjamin's overall skill set and his landing spot right there more so than I would like some of the other later running backs. So I think that's all that went into his possible success in that model. Let's see. Next question is how. Yeah, in one of my tweets, I said that I felt like I was one of the few people who were off of Darrell Henderson last year. Which, I mean, everywhere I looked on Twitter, it seemed like Darrell Henderson was going to be a monster just from every. Not going to call out anybody, but it was just literally it was everywhere, and everything I was looking at, whether it was the stats or the opportunity or just the way he runs and things like that, like I just wasn't really seeing it. I can still definitely be wrong, and I feel like it's either going to be Darrell Henderson or Cam Akers this year at the Rams. I mean, it's got to be, but I'd still rather think that I'd still rather take Cam Akers just with his skill set. The fact that they took Darrell Henderson so early and had him for a year, yet they still went and got Cam Akers as early as they did, I think that says a lot about what the Rams hope for in Darrell Henderson, whether that's a committee or not, or whether they just don't think he's the guy. So that's really intriguing to me about Cam Akers, just the Rams offense. You kind of just need to get a piece of, I think, whether it's Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods. I mean, if you haven't seen Matthew Berry's 100 Facts article today about Robert Woods, I think that speaks for itself. He's always slept on year after year, but that Rams offense is still potent, even if they didn't have quite their Super Bowl repeat year. And so I think just Sean McVay, seeing what he's already had in Darrell Henderson for a full season and still taking Cam Akers where he did, says kind of enough about that for me to be leaning more toward Akers than Darrell right now. Let's see. Then another one says, if you're grabbing one of the top 5 rookie running backs, not named Clyde, which one are you taking if given the opportunity? So that one hurts because you know from my tweet that Clyde is my guy. I mean, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I think he's a beast. But I would say probably outside of the top 5, assuming that the top 5 is Edwards-Helaire, Swift, Taylor, Dobbins, Akers, I would say probably Zack Moss, for kind of the same reasons. Just from Scott Barrett does a great job after the drafts every single year. Or at least the last 2 years, he's been digging really into the press conferences after players are picked and just seeing what the coaches have to say about them. And there was some really good gold in there, just talking about how Zack Moss, they want him to be just like Frank Gore was. And Frank Gore was frustrating for all Devin Singletary owners last year because of just how reluctant they were to give up the full time load to Devin Singletary. So it must be by design. But I mean, Zack Moss having the early down role he was a PFF favorite heading into this season for sure. and he's graded greatly again this year. But Zack Moss, he can kind of do it all, and they definitely have a role in mind for him. They said they would even be looking at him in the red zone too. So I think just with the Bills' rushing offense and the way that they like to pound the ball, I think he's one of the few that I would be looking at really seriously if you were to follow up to me in the late second, early third, something like that. If I already loaded up on wide receiver in the first round or two. Let's see. CEH hype conductor. I like that. It says a redraft situation he finds himself in. It's 12 team, half PPR. End of draft pick 12. You can usually grab Duke Johnson. Other players are Darrington Evans, Raquel Armstead, Kenny Stills, Boston Scott. If any of those stand out to you or just typical dart throws, I would say, I mean, just not to keep shouting out Scott Barrett every single time, but his upside article I think is something really important to keep in mind here, because when you're in draft pick 12, round 12 plus in a PPR, your roster's pretty much already set. I mean, you've got 2-3 running backs, 3-4-5 wide receivers, quarterback, maybe 2 tight end. So at that point, you've already got your starters. So you're either looking to handcuff or you're looking for, or you should be looking for just upside, those league winning guys. So I think of those, I mean, Duke Johnson, he's exactly what you're going to get out of Duke Johnson every single week, because even when it seemed like there was nothing in his way last year, they still would only give him a limited workload, and he was still getting, that around 9 to 10 points a week. So if that's something that your roster is looking for and still desperately needs by around 12, I would say Duke Johnson's a fine pick. But if you're looking for upside, I mean, Darrington Evans could get a bell cow workload if Derrick Henry were to go down, which he very well could, just the way that he pounds the ball and plays so aggressively. So I mean, I would say if I was looking for upside, I'd be looking at Darrington Evans as running back or Kenny Stills as wide receiver, just with everything going on at the Texans with Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks, Randall Cobb, I believe, and Kenny Stills. I think that he's proven to be a week winner time after time again. And so if he gets a full-time load and Deshaun Watson just finds himself out there running for his life with no one else around him, Kenny Stills can be a great value in round 12 as well. So I'd be looking for upside in that situation. All right, DJ Wheeze says he has absolutely zero interest in IDP formats. And what would I say to try to persuade him into giving it a try? I mean, honestly, I would say that I had never learned as much about football or even enjoyed watching football, even a fourth of as much as I did once I was in an IDP league. I mean, you notice so many more things. You notice pre-snap motions on the defensive side. You're looking for your guy, in that first year of IDP when you're still learning your players' numbers and all about the defensive rotations. Like you are watching so intently when you're just trying to see your IDP guy get a tackle. And it's so fun because a lot of it can be random for sure, and that can be frustrating to some, but also just to have your linebacker out there knowing he's a beast and watching him hunt down a guy is just something that is so like fun because you're never out of a play. You can always scoop up a fumble. You can always, get an interception somewhere, and you just pay so much more attention to the game as it's going on rather than, your quarterback goes off the field. You're not going to score when the defense is out there. So you're going to flip the channel to something else. But if you have IDP and offense, you're always going to find one of your players that's starting that week on a channel somewhere. If you got the red zone pass or whatever it is, or Sunday ticket, and you're just trying to find, you're just watching all your guys. You always, for 3 hours, you'll be constantly entertained with watching somebody on your roster. And it's just so fun to set up that side of the strategy too. Like you can involve them in trades, kind of helps you on the offensive side if you load up on defense and you trying to give it out for rookie picks or something like that. I mean, there's just so many possibilities that you can do with IDP, and the scoring is so unique. There's so many. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen 2 IDP leagues with the same scoring, honestly. So there's just a lot of possibilities there, and a lot more that goes into watching football that is really just entertaining to me. Let's see. Next question is about rookie research. Do I know a lot about Rojo and how has he progressed? Is Vaughn a real threat, especially considering the preseason? Yeah, so I am kind of in tune to the Tampa Bay situation because my best friend is actually a diehard Buccaneers fan. So I've been watching Buccaneers games with him for, I mean, years, at least 4 or 5 seasons. I've seen every single Jameis Winston game, which is, that's brutal in its own right. But he pretty much fills me in on the Bucks buzz every single day, just whatever any beat writer's saying, because he loves Ronald Jones, and Bruce Arians has said great things about him. But I mean, I would say Keyshawn Vaughn's definitely a real threat. The biggest thing that's in Keyshawn Vaughn way right now is definitely just this unique preseason, offseason, like you said. I mean, without people being able to meet in person and get those reps and that trust, Tom Brady's a big trust guy, as we saw with James White and Rex Burkhead, among other running backs. If Tom Brady doesn't feel safe with you out there on the field, you're not going to be out there. So, I mean, I definitely think Ronald Jones is going to get that first 5, 6, 7 week workload just unencumbered by Keyshawn Vaughn. But I think Ronald Jones, I mean, he showed that there was a lot missing early on in his career. Not to say he can't turn it around, but I think Keyshawn Vaughn, to answer your question of is he a real threat, I would say he's definitely a real threat. But right now I'm still leaning toward Ronald Jones, just from what I've heard from Bruce Arians and kind of giving him a break to get a sense of that offense. It's kind of hard to get a rhythm when every 5 or 6 plays you're getting picked off and going back to the bench, Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see. Next question is AJ Dillon marked as a bust. Is this because Aaron Jones is there? And you think he'll resign, or are there other factors that play in? Yeah, so that rookie model, it completely based on the first 3 years of the season. Whether or not and the rookie running back is likelihood of 1,000-yard rushing year. And so, yeah, Aaron Jones being there, young, having a great year last year, no real sign of slowing down. The Packers did run the ball more than I thought they would this year, which surprised me. But they were winning games, so it doesn't seem like Matt LaFleur is going to really try to change that up too much. So I mean, it was a very interesting pick. They deserved to get wrecked on Twitter, in my opinion, when they saw him. I liked AJ Dillon just as a prospect in general, but I hated his landing spot to Green Bay. So I mean, Jamal Williams is still there. That like Aaron Rodgers likes Jamal Williams. Everybody in the locker room likes Jamal Williams, from what I've read. So he's a guy that they're going to get on the field as well. He just seems third in a committee of 3 without a ton of pass catching work, and pass catching work's the easiest way to rack up fantasy points. So I'm fading him. He takes an injury, but I think somebody like Kenyan Drake or Derrick Henry is more likely to get injured than Aaron Jones necessarily, to have like a real workload takeover. So AJ Dillon, he falls in that same category as the others, but with slightly less of a success profile and less raw opportunity, I would say, available to him. Let's see. Next question is, just started going through the wide receiver model. He's been working on his own, but mine is formatted well. He doesn't see Breakout Age listed anywhere on there. So yeah, I don't really use Breakout Age. I do believe in Breakout Age. I think it's definitely something that should be noted, and I definitely reference it when I'm looking on these wide receiver studies. But it's just something that, let's see. Yeah, it's just not something that I factor into the model because of so many different situations when I just want to kind of leave it up to the physical stats, the opportunity available, the production in college. And then if it gets down to, the nitty gritty of looking at projecting where they would fall in a depth chart, if they have a younger breakout age and they, someone like Juju Smith-Schuster broke out super young, then yeah, they are definitely more proof of a higher trajectory, and they'll be that tiebreaker. For somebody that's very similarly profiled, you can find, I mean, all the wide receivers are between 6 foot, 6'4", 190, 210 pounds, run all about the same. I mean, within 10th of a second, 40s. You look at some of their breakout ages and the ways that they've been able to take over a Power 5 offense and just be a stud on it. It's something that it's not in my calculation necessarily, but it is something that I definitely refer to. And just trying to get it presentation worthy on Twitter. It's so hard to get 20 different factors into one screenshot to put on a tweet because people want it to be easily digestible. So that's just my advice. I would say if you're talking about formatting as well. Just think about who's going to be reading it in mind, and you just try to think that even if they didn't read a single caption you wrote and they looked at the pictures, that they'd still get the message across. That's kind of the key to all the formatting that I do. But I do appreciate the kind words. Let's see. Looking at Raiders wide receivers, I have Ruggs and Edwards listed as busts in the model. Historically, Gruden loves that big downfield threat, something that either they theoretically could fill. I agree. Do you think they both failed to live up to it, sabotage, or other factor like Terrell Williams? Yeah, so I I was a big Terrell Williams believer last year on Twitter. I was pushing him extremely hard just as a great value, especially before the Antonio Brown stuff, because I am a Steelers fan. I knew the drama was going to be there. And so that was just like, an extra bonus. If Antonio Brown went crazy and just like got off the team for however reason or got hurt or something, Terrell Williams was going to have a massive workload. Thankfully, that did happen. And we were seeing the results, to start the year. He had a touchdown in, let's see, trying to pull it up, but I think he had a touchdown like 4 or 5, 6 straight weeks, as well as 50 yards, something like that, just to get the year started. So that was, a huge boost. I thought he was off to a great start, even with Derek Carr not throwing for 300 yards a single time last season. Kind of crazy. Just Terrell Williams as a deep threat, getting that wide receiver 1. I think he was wide receiver 15 or something like that through his first 5 games. He had a touchdown in every single one of those games and had 90 yards or more twice. And then he kind of was just a shell of himself when he got back from that injury. I think he had a foot injury, and with a deep field threat, a foot injury like that is tough to come back from. But he still ended the year well. He had another touchdown second to last week of the year and 80 yards receiving before that, kind of when he got healthy again. So yeah, Terrell Williams is still there. Ruggs, I think, is still going to have some bursts as that downfield threat. That's definitely why they spent the draft capital on him. But in terms of listing him as a bust, it was more so I don't think he's going to get enough deep shots to connect early on to account for 800 yards. Kind of like Marquise Brown's week 1. Remember that last year, how he just exploded? I kind of see Henry Ruggs having almost essentially that whole game's worth of deep shots kind of over the course of his rookie season with a quarterback like Derek Carr versus Lamar Jackson. So yeah, the bust needs to be taken into context with it being 800 yards or 8 touchdowns to qualify as not a bust in that model. But yeah, I think it's just the overall quantity of those targets. I think he's still gonna dazzle us with some. He's gonna take a catch and break it off to the house and something like that, and it'll be amazing. And that'll be the play you remember, next offseason. But in terms of him being like a wide receiver 30 or better early on, I think it's going to be tough with the Raiders, just with Josh Jacobs, Darren Waller, Terrell Williams, Bryan Edwards as well, and Jalen Richard or Lynn Bowden, whoever it is, as a second running back there in that Raiders offense. So I hope that helps. Let's see. Another question about IDP. Are you one of the many who believe that nerfed IDP scoring is out of date and you should better reflect the impact defensive players have in the game? Do you prefer a certain system? Yeah, so I would definitely say that there needs to be an edge position designation in IDP lineups. Just, putting an outside linebacker as a linebacker when he gets maybe 4 tackles and the occasional sack versus the inside linebackers that get 9, 10, 11 tackles a week. That just pushes them down the list, and they're just worthless in a standard IDP scoring. So I think there definitely needs to be an edge designation to lump defensive end and edge together. Even defensive tackle, if you want to put that in there, I would put defensive tackle as its own thing, because when you add the intricacy of defensive tackle, it gets really interesting. There's just a whole other layer that goes into it, and more player values that you can. It's always fun to do trades with more players in the pool, But an edge designation, defensive end and outside linebacker together as one position, just makes every single player worth something. It's no fun to have a player that's worth, like TJ Watt. He's an incredible player, and I'm biased as a Steelers fan, but he's put up some really good numbers the last 2 years. And if you're in a standard IDP scoring with no edge designation and they're just lumped in with the linebackers, He's still like linebacker 8, but if you put him in edge, he's number 1 by like a large margin. Is worth so much more. So I would say that is definitely out of date in that way. And I've seen some websites go into it a little bit better, but I'd love to see mainstream sites like ESPN, really push that as their format, their default format for IDP. Next question by Tart. It says, not strictly a fantasy question, but what player in the league do I enjoy watching the most? Chris Godwin, for sure. He's my profile picture on Twitter for a reason. He's I mean, that's probably stems back from me watching all those Buccaneers games with my friend, but he just takes over when he gets locked in. Him and Michael Thomas are kind of just those two guys that when you see him catch 2 passes in a row or something like that, and they're catching fire a little bit, it's just so fun to watch them just make a corner or a safety so dizzy against them and just kind of run circles around them. And in that NFC South offense, all of them, Falcons, their duo, the Saints duo now with Sanders, the Buccaneers duo, Panthers, they got DJ Moore as well. So just overall, that whole division is so fun. But yeah, Chris Godwin and Michael Thomas are just so fun to watch. I have Michael Thomas on a few dynasty rosters, and half the time I just forget because I'm just having so much fun watching him and just how masterful he is with his game. Let's see, Sam. Another question is, myself being inexperienced at IDP, do you find ranking, projecting, valuing is more difficult? Definitely so. I'd say the main reason is because those trade calculators that you see, we just saw a Dynasty trade calculator partner with IDP Pros to be the first one really to offer anything like that in IDP. But I would say, yeah, just the lack of, those DLF has arguably the best calculator I've seen out there. The MyDLF app, making trades, you can plug in your own league and it will import every single person's roster. You can put in, each of the person you're trying to trade with, you can have a drop down menu of their own team, put them with your guys, and whatever value is off, they'll put in a suggested player that fits that value. Like, say you got Michael Thomas and somebody like, I don't know, AJ Brown. There's just a small, with AJ Brown's age versus Michael Thomas's dominance, you throw in somebody like Josh Jacobs. I don't know, just going off the top of my head, but that calculator will automatically put it in for you. So that helps a lot with just valuing IDP or valuing a certain player. Just having that calculator, just knowing exactly what kind of the range you should be looking for is to complement somebody. So the lack of that in trade calculators mainstream has definitely been the biggest problem with valuing IDP, especially when you're trying to do an offensive and defensive trade or trading IDP for picks. So that's really where the opportunity has been for analysts to kind of get in the game with IDP, just rankings. And my rankings are on DLF. They'll be updated for defensive end or defensive line, linebacker, and defensive back probably tomorrow. They'll be refreshed. But yeah, I mean, the ranking and projecting, it's not too hard to project them, honestly, because they're pretty static year over year as in terms of a player level. But ranking in terms of dynasty with age and the lifespan on a guy like a defensive end lasting so much longer than a linebacker necessarily, like you saw with Kuechly. I think dynasty ranking is very difficult, but seasonal ranking is not too bad because it's pretty repeatable year after year for the most part. And then those truly elite guys kind of just break those projections and are in a league or in a tier of their own. So yeah, I'd say the hardest thing was just this lack of calculator values with no specific guidance for people that are inexperienced like you. Just having no experience with knowing what IDP could be worth, that would be massively hard to try to figure out what fits that and what's worth the opportunity cost of giving up a guy. So that'd definitely be the hardest thing, I'd say. Let's see. Next question is, how do I feel about DK Metcalf? He finds himself looking at Lockett or Metcalf in a draft, or Metcalf and OBJ. He's been going Odell, then Lockett, then DK, but it seems close, and it's half PPR. So yeah, I like that train of thought. I think that is probably the right order. Odell is just burning you off of recency bias, and the Browns, just the way they've been run for so long, and Baker Mayfield not living up to the hype after last year, which kind of seemed impossible to get to in the first place from where they were to saying they were going to be a 12 win team after getting Odell and a few other guys. I think the moves they've made at offensive line are very underrated. With the guys they've gone out and picked up, they picked up some all pro offensive tackles, offensive guards. So that I think is going to be huge for the Browns. And with Odell's core injuries that they were talking about, if he's really healed up, definitely I would say Odell first, and then Lockett DK is definitely interesting. I like Lockett a lot, but I kind of find myself taking DK more lately, and most of it is just because for him to have the season he did his rookie year and lead the league in red zone targets amongst anybody as a rookie, I think just the sky's the limit. I mean, I put out a tweet last year that the 3 lowest guys in terms of drop rate in the NFL for a whole year, I think 2 years ago, the top 3 were all Seahawks for lowest drop rate. And sure, Tyler Lockett and Jerron Brown and I forget the other one. I mean, sure, they're great NFL talents, but the reason that they're bottom 3 or top 3, however you want to look at it, in drop rate is because Russell Wilson is just so accurate with football, and he's just a master out there. So, I mean, he's going to get great targets. I wish they would just let Russell Wilson, do his thing, but they seem very committed to this 2 running back smash mouth football mindset. But DK Metcalf, he's already got the red zone. He's got that red zone upside. He's proven that. Lockett's had some injuries in the past, which is kind of worrisome just as a reliable, by the time the playoffs get around, you worry if he's going to be all good the way he is. So I'd probably go Odell, DK, Lockett, but DK and Lockett is honestly just a toss-up to me. It kind of depends on what the rest of your roster looks like. If you need upside, and it's like a high-end wide receiver pick, and you need just someone that can go out there and get you 30 points, I'd go Lockett. But if you're just looking for consistency and a high floor, I think DK is the guy, especially in half PPR. All right, next question is from TMoney, and it says, if you're starting IDP only league today, preferred settings and format, redraft, dynasty, best ball, I would say dynasty for sure. 10 or 12 team, I would do 12 team. And then roster size and positions. So I touched on this a little bit earlier. I would say defensive tackle as its own position. Just one of those. You don't need, get more than one defensive tackle, and it's just not even fun anymore. You're just throwing in random defensive tackles hoping that they'll score. But I think there's at least 12 out there that can be pretty reliable and are good assets to hold. I would do an edge designation, probably 2. I would do 2 edge designations as either defensive end or outside linebacker specifically. I would do 3 linebackers, inside linebackers. They're deep. There's plenty of those. I would do 1 corner and 2 safeties, and then I would open up to 2 extra flexes, as whatever that wanted to be. You put an edge in there. It'd probably be edge, linebacker, or safety. But that's kind of, I would go defensive tackle, 2 edge, 3 linebacker, 1 corner, 2 safety, and 2 extra flexes. I think that would be just the strongest. I think that'd be the most fun. There'd be plenty of talent around, but also just so many, especially in a dynasty format, so many strategic moves to make. Do you roll the dice back on Keanu Neal, who was a monster his first 2 seasons, but he's been hurt both of the last 2 and really burned some people? Do you think he's going to come back to what he was and you get a nice investment on him, or do you go for somebody like Jamal Adams, who has been nothing but amazing, but looks like he's going to be on a different team next year? So there's a whole lot of layers to that. There's linebackers, someone like Kuechly retiring, you can never plan for, and that's a bummer, especially in Dynasty. It happened to me this year, but that would be my ideal roster construction. Let's see. Also, he says Colts coaches compare Michael Pittman to Vincent Jackson. Does he have potential to be that good or even better? So Vincent Jackson, I mean, that's a great comp. I would say I've been trying to put my finger on exactly what I would compare Michael Pittman to, and I think that's a great comp is Vincent Jackson. His career stats are great. I mean, if you're better than Vincent Jackson, that's a pretty great career. But I would say, yeah, I mean, I kind of expect something along that line, honestly. Depends on what their future quarterback's going to be. But for Phillip Rivers this year, and having, let's see, T.Y. Hilton and Zach Pascal out there, I mean, you've got Marlon Mack, who's not really a pass catcher. You've got Jonathan Taylor. You've got Nyheim Hines, who Frank Reich says he wants to get the ball to a decent amount. But, I mean, besides T.Y., this really looks like Michael Pittman. And he's also my guy. So this rookie season, I'm getting Michael Pittman in every single draft. So take that with a grain of salt. But I really think Pittman, that comp to Vincent Jackson's a great one, and I totally believe in that. And everything I've seen in my rookie models and in coach speak has been nothing but to back that up. And I think Phillip Rivers is a great quarterback in that first year. You know, Phillip Rivers is experienced. He's a veteran. He knows where to get the ball where it needs to be. So he can be a great confidence booster for Michael Pittman as well. And Michael Pittman just seems to be like a guy who is one of the hardest working dudes on the football field. So I'm really excited to see what Michael Pittman does. I hope something like injury doesn't derail it so we can see his true potential, but I'm a big believer in Michael Pittman this year. And in Dynasty, not just regular. All right, next question is Swift versus Akers is a pretty common debate. And yes, I did edge Swift over Akers. Any particular reasons for that? Are they comparable for the most part in your eyes? And the same question for Rager versus Jefferson. So yeah, Swift versus Akers, I would say just the tiebreaker in that mindset for Swift for me is just what he did in college was, I mean, dominant. He's run with some amazing, talented guys at Georgia, and he's looked like the best one out of the last few years to me, even over. I mean, Todd Gurley was, amazing in his own right, but DeAndre Swift has looked just as good, in my opinion, in college, and just the way that he runs the ball is so patient, but also so aggressive at the same time. And so, yeah, DeAndre Swift. I mean, Clyde got a 99% on my model. I mean, out of 100, obviously. And Swift was next with 82.3%, just in his total physical combine, his 40, his height, his weight, his vertical, his 3-cone, everything that was available at the time because of the COVID outbreak that limited some of that. But his efficiency in college, his age, breakout age, like we talked about before, the volume that he got, it's important to note that he was dominant, but he also wasn't overrun in college because they had so many talented guys at Georgia, Nick Chubb and all those guys. Excuse me, but but yeah, I mean, Swift. It's like I said, it's important to note he was dominant, but he also didn't get overrun. Someone like Jonathan Taylor or Ino Benjamin, those guys ran the ball so many times, and there's kind of like it seems like there's just this imaginary cap on college carries to where they're just so beaten up or so run down. I don't know what it is, but those hits that they take accumulate over time for sure. I mean, we see it in guys, even quarterbacks like Cam Newton. So DeAndre Swift, he has fresher legs than Akers, I would say. Akers ran behind a terrible line and still did really well, which looks like that might be the case again in LA with the Rams. But Akers, Darrell Henderson's a bigger threat to me than Kerryon Johnson is necessarily, just from what I've seen with Swift's skill set compared to Kerryon's versus Akers and Darrell's. There's so many mouths to feed in the Rams offense with Akers that I kind of worry that he might get kind of a limited role, kind of like the San Fran committee, but not as rush heavy. Meanwhile, Swift, he's done nothing but good things in his college career, and he still has a lot of miles to go. And it's an offense that loves to prioritize running the ball, probably more so than their own good. but yeah, that'd be my logic between those. I was happy to see the model back that up as well. And the same question for Rager versus Jefferson. Yeah, Jefferson. It completely depends on what the Vikings and end up doing. Olabisi Johnson might be a steal this year. I mean, if they keep Justin Jefferson as much in the slot as he was at LSU, and keep him there in the Vikings and put Olabisi Johnson outside. Olabisi had a great college career, I believe at Colorado State. So if they keep Jefferson and Thielen rotated in the slot and put the other one outside, I'm getting kind of off on a tangent here, but old BC Johnson, I might have to put a thread out on him, just his potential as an outside 100% wide receiver with Kirk Cousins. But yeah, Justin Jefferson, I see great things for him. He was they were both successes in the model, so it's obviously close. But Justin Jefferson in the slot with Kirk Cousins, as well as Dalvin Cook and Adam Thielen, versus Jalen Reagor having Miles Sanders, Alshon Jeffrey, who's often injured, unfortunately. But that's just something that you got to be thinking about with the way you look at Dynasty, and Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. I think there's a lot more down the field possibilities for Reagor, who is somebody who just tore it up at TCU. I mean, his athletic stats in every single way, when I put them into my model, were among the best and among the top percent in this year's class with Reagor. So, I mean, he commanded 25% of his yardage his final year, 42% of the touchdowns that TCU scored in receiving touchdowns in the last 2 seasons, and 20% of the receptions. And so Reagor's, he can kind of do it all. He can, no matter where he is on the field, he's somebody that will constantly pose a threat, and is somebody that I see Wentz kind of getting on track with, because I saw a tweet the other day that he was I think he was the first quarterback ever to throw for 4,000 yards without a wide receiver having 500 yards. And so even without a reliable blanket or just a guy that he knows he can go throw the ball to, I think Reagor's that guy, and Peterson will love to get him involved early and often. And Greg Cassell, Fantasy Points and SiriusXM, said he might lead the team in targets this year, at least among wide receivers for sure. So that's just something that I'm really intrigued with, and something that I'm believing in. I'm buying on that. So it's slightly Reagor over Jefferson for me, but anytime Thielen or Diggs move to the slot, that's where they produced most of their fantasy points. And Jefferson is a slot monster, so it's not like I'm saying I don't believe in Justin Jefferson either. Let's see. Next question is a ton of content regarding my take on rookie offensive players, but not so much on the defensive side of the ball. Yes. So there are. So yes, I just haven't really posted too much of that yet. It's been something that I was just kind of getting back into it, just with grad school, and I'm getting married in a few weeks, which is exciting. But it's just something that I've been trying to get back into the content while also taking care of real life things as well. So there will be a lot more rookie IDP stuff coming. One exciting thing is my disruption score. I don't know if you saw that on Twitter last year, but it's basically just the measure of how efficient a player is at getting to the quarterback, either forcing a fumble, getting a sack, breaking up a pass. And it's mainly a linebacker defensive end stat, which is it's really been predictive year over year in terms of guys that are great IDP investments, or just guys that are talented guys. I mean, it's generally a score of 0 to 100, and an elite disruption score for a defensive end or an outside linebacker, kind of that edge spot, is any score above 40. And so I actually haven't posted this yet, but I can post it in here right now. And the disruption scores for last season, using the stat that I created for defensive ends and linebackers, I'll drop that in here right now. But here are the guys that actually scored above 40 points, and I haven't put this on Twitter yet, so that's why you haven't seen it. I do appreciate you looking for it. But this right here is the disruption score leaders from last year, and so you see a lot of guys. I mean, a lot of household names. You see J.J. Watt, Myles Garrett, T.J. Watt, JPP, Brian Burns, Aaron Donald, Everson Griffin, Nick Bosa. Joey Bosa was just below the 40 threshold, but that's just like one of the IDP things I'm working on. Projections will get built out soon enough, so that will be something to be looking for on Twitter for sure. But yeah, I mean, Carl Lawson, he only played, I believe, 12 games, and had 4 sacks. But it basically looks at your efficiency. So based on the number of snaps you got, based on the number of tackles you got, based on all those things, how often were you disrupting the game? Were you hitting the quarterback? Were you hitting the football, knocking it loose, making a big play? And so those are the guys that were the elite score. Hope y'all enjoyed that. That shows also some guys to be investing in if you can get them for cheap. I mean, Brian Burns, 53 disruption score his rookie year is pretty solid. Derek Barnett, I swear he's one of the best dynasty defensive ends to get, but he just never really turns it into sacks yet. He's the pressure king, but he just hasn't burst through on the IDP scene. So I got one more year of patience to give on Derek Barnett. I just got him in an IDP league this offseason. I still believe in him, and seeing his disruption score right here, I think that's just something that gives me hope in one more year of putting up with Derek Barnett. So, I mean, Shaq Barrett led the league in sacks. There he is at 62. Robert Quinn, the Dallas defensive line always rotates, but he shows to be effective when he's out there. Zadarius Smith, best sack dancer in the league. And to answer somebody's question earlier about why IDP, the fact that I know all of these things, Zadarius Smith being one of the best, most entertaining sack dancers in the league, you wouldn't necessarily know that unless you're looking at IDP guys. So it just adds a whole other layer of fun to it. But yeah, Chris Jones as defensive tackle, Chandler Jones, we all know how good he is, Ryan Kerrigan. All these guys are guys that I'd be looking at in IDP leagues, especially in a dynasty lens. If it's somebody that hasn't quite broken out yet, or somebody that, if you're wondering if it was a fluke, if it's one of these guys, odds are it wasn't. Let's see, back up to the top. Do you believe Clyde Edwards-Helaire put up Kareem Hunt numbers in 0.5 PPR? Yes. Will it be this year? Not sure. I know that's not really the answer you're looking for, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I mean, and Andy Reid has said himself, Brian Westbrook plus. And so if you know you're getting Brian Westbrook, or at least the guy who's going to look at making Brian Westbrook happen with that kind of offense and those weapons with Kelsey and Hill and Hardman and Mahomes, I think you got to go all in on that. It's the clear 101, and it's not even close. I think he's definitely going to put up Kareem Hunt numbers when the time comes. Mahomes is going to be there probably forever if they're smart. So Edwards-Helaire is going to have 4 or 5 years on that rookie deal alone with Hardman and probably not Sammy Watkins. Who knows what he's going to be doing, but and Travis Kelsey out there just keeping those defensive backs and those linebackers honest, having to cover them. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire can put up Christian McCaffrey-like numbers with that short to intermediate middle of the field open, just from the way Mahomes is. Because if you try to cover Clyde Edwards-Helaire on a 2-yard catch, he's going to burn you with Mecole Hardman on an 80-yard catch, and you're just going to look silly. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's an amazing route runner. He's very silky when he runs. And it's just something that, I think he will put up Kareem Hunt numbers. It might not be this year, just as they pass the torch over with Damian Williams. I mean, it'd be kind of hard to just bench him immediately after what he did, basically winning that Super Bowl for the Chiefs last year. And just like we saw with Christian McCaffrey, the Panthers were too hesitant with him to give him the workload from the start. With Jonathan Stewart, they ran the ball with him for far too long, collecting 2 yards per carry, while McCaffrey would go run one off for 7. So I think he will get there. I think he will be Kareem Hunt just like that, especially in 0.5 PPR or any kind of PPR. But it might take a year or half a year to get to that point. Let's see. Toilet Friend says, barring any injuries, how do you foresee snap distribution between Washington's running backs? Yeah, so this one's interesting. I'm sure you guys, if you're plugged into the Dynasty Twitter world at all, you've been seeing a lot of Antonio. Let's see. I believe it's Antonio Gibson praise. Just with the new offensive coach under Ron Rivera, Scott Turner, he focuses his running backs all the time, especially in the run game. And so between Adrian Peterson, Darius Geis, and Antonio Gibson, I would say Antonio Gibson is by far the best candidate there for the Redskins to be looking at third down. So, I mean, I'd say Adrian Peterson. I mean, he's Adrian Peterson. As long as Geis is healthy, we kind of saw some previews of it. I wish I saw that question earlier. I would have pulled up the exact numbers for you to look at. But I would say pretty healthy rotation, pretty evenly healthy rotation on Geis and AP in the first 2 downs for sure, especially when they're both healthy. And then Antonio Gibson and Darius Geis probably second, third down, even split, I would say as well. I mean, I think Geis will always be present, and then the other part of that offense will be either Adrian Peterson in the early downs or Antonio Gibson in the later downs. Just that's how Norv Turner runs his offense. It goes through the running back. It'll be great for somebody like Dwayne Haskins still building up his confidence with only Terry McLaurin as a sure option right now. We're hoping Gandy Golden can be that on the other side, but it's yet to be seen. So that's kind of how I'd say it. I would want Geis first, knowing his injury history, but then I'd rather get Antonio Gibson late than get AP in the middle round in that Washington offense, if that makes any sense. Then another question is Green Bay's backfield playing out. I think it's just feed Aaron Jones. I mean, Matt LaFleur said he wants to get all three running backs involved, which who knows if Aaron Jones will even let that happen if he has any kind of season like he did last year. I mean, Aaron Jones is a beast. I think he was running back 5 last year in fantasy. And if he plays the way he does, it's going to be hard to get him off the field for any reason. So I would say probably 70% Aaron Jones, 20% Jamal Williams, 10% AJ Dillon, especially in his rookie year. And if there's no Corona, COVID practice sessions for a while, I could do something like that. But even when Jamal Williams is healthy, they get him out there for pass blocking and all that stuff. So snap-wise, probably like 60, 30, 10 Aaron Jones, but carries probably 75, 20, 70, 20, 10 Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, AJ Dillon is what I would envision. Let's see. Space Force Ghost says, do I think Chris Godwin will finish as the wide receiver 1 this year? Let's see. I haven't really built out the full exact projections yet, but I mean, Chris Godwin seems like the kind of guy Tom Brady would just absolutely love. I'm pretty sure that's a major reason why Tom Brady would go to Tampa Bay. Just that talent is unreal that they have on offense. So I think he'll be wide receiver 1 for sure. The wide receiver 1. I'll say no. I'll say more like 6 or 7. I think Mike Evans out there, Gronk. They're gonna get the ball around. He's never really been a feed one guy, at least in recent memory, on the Patriots and stuff like that. He's got like a Julian Edelman, but that could also be someone like Tyler Johnson, who they got for a steal in the 5th round, in my opinion, over the middle of the field, or someone like Gronk or O.J. Howard, as well as Chris Godwin. So I think in order to be the wide receiver 1, you just have to get constantly fed, just game after game after game. And I'd be looking more toward somebody like Devontae Adams, just with that Packers offense, or Michael Thomas. You can't go wrong going Michael Thomas, as he was literally the one last year. So I'll take him as a mid to later wide receiver 1, maybe 5 through 8 range. Not the wide receiver 1, though I'd love to see it. This is my profile picture. Congrats on getting married. Thank you. Appreciate that. Congrats on getting married again. Wish you well. Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, guys, appreciate that. This was a lot of fun. These are great questions. I mean, I didn't know exactly what the questions were going to be heading into it. So it's fun to kind of go off the cuff a little bit and just talk about, the whole rankings process, what I see in the rookies, what I see in IDP. If you're not in an IDP league yet, I would strongly encourage you to join one. It is a ton of fun. Even if you do one for free, just for a year, and take it seriously, you'll learn so much more about football, and it'll be so much more enjoyable to watch. So yeah, I appreciate the kind words. You can find me on Twitter at Ryan Miller NFL, and on Dynasty League Football, I'll be posting some more articles. I just submitted my rookie wide receiver model article. You can find that in more depth than the 140 characters on Twitter will allow. And yeah, I appreciate the questions, and hope everyone has a great night.